Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen speaking. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis blog. Welcome to this episode, which is an in-depth Q&A about the psychological illusion model and the psychological illusion model seminars that I'm doing. I got some questions from Mette Bergholt, who is promoting a seminar with me in Denmark on May 19th and May 20th, 2018. So here we go. So the first question here is, how is this psychological illusion model approach different from my previous approaches? For those of you who may have read Provocative Hypnosis or Provocative Suggestions, um, or how is it different from other schools or approaches of hypnosis and change work? Well, let me offer a little story to illustrate this. Um, a main mentor of mine, John Grinder, who used to very generously teach me for like 5 or 6 years, used to say that the difference between a professional athlete and an amateur, looking away from the pay, is that the pro does less. And I've always found this to be a very insightful saying, because if you look at the pro, well, he might be more active, but he's doing less for everything that he's actually doing. He's only tensing his muscles. He's only moving at the moment that he actually has to. So my opinion is that most hypnotherapists, most psychotherapists, most coaches do way too much. There's too much flab, there's too much fat in the approaches. So my learning curve over the last 21 years of doing this work professionally has been one of slicing away the fat, one of looking at what can I take away? What can I eliminate here? What am I doing here that I don't really need to do? And as a result of doing this over a long period of time, I've been able to make the work very, very simple by kind of coming into some first principles about change. So the way this is different is that it's way, way, way simpler than anything I've done in the past. So this is less about learning and it's more about unlearning all the stuff that you really don't need to do. At the same time that it's about doing way less, it's also about not imposing any bullshit. So most therapists, or almost all of them, most schools of change impose a belief system, an ideology, a set of diagnosis on the people that they work with. We might be imposing notions such as conscious and unconscious minds, or the idea of a mental illness that has to be treated, um, or the notion that you have to set up communication with this so-called unconscious mind, or that you have to go into this special state that's labeled hypnosis, or that you have to explore the person's past, or you have to find out the person's goals and then move them towards their goals. We're imposing a lot of stuff that we really don't need to impose. So this particular approach views the issues that people come in with as basically psychological illusions. And you don't really treat a psychological illusion. The way you deal with a psychological illusion is by helping people discover the nature of it, by helping people to see through it. So one big difference between the way I currently work and the way I used to work is that for many, many years, having a base in NLP and various schools of hypnosis and rational emotive behavior therapy, which is quite similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, various meditation approaches, I would often, use techniques and formats to help people change. And one big drawback in this was that even though I would always at the same time emphasize that the client was really doing the changes and that they really had the resources inside of them, People very often left thinking that I was brilliant, or that NLP and hypnosis, kind of did it to them, or that the power somehow lies in the technique. And I think that's a very flawed understanding. I think it's a way, I think it's a misunderstanding that you want to do whatever you can to not have your clients leave with. So these days, I might still do various thought experiments, paradoxes, games, hypnotic phenomena, storytelling, but I don't do it to create a change. I use it as tools to help people make embodied insights and discoveries. And you might ask, well, what kind of discoveries? And what do you mean by a psychological illusion model? And what I essentially mean is this. We human beings think all the time, and a lot of the time we're lost in thought. So we're essentially thinking without quite knowing that we're thinking. And this gives rise to a lot of misunderstandings and some psychological illusions. One psychological illusion is that it gives rise to the illusion that our feelings kind of come from so-called outside events or life circumstances, or what other people say or do, or that we directly experience the past, or the future. This is completely illusory, and you can help people see through that. Another consequence of thinking without quite knowing that we're thinking is that it gives rise to the illusion that we are identical with the voice in our head, that we essentially are whatever the thinking process projects us to be in the moment. It gives rise to this illusion of a self in here, a thing like self that is doing the thinking and authoring the experience. And this this illusion lies at the heart of a lot of our unnecessary suffering, and it's possible to see through it. So that is mainly what is different about my current approach. I'll give you one client story, which kind of bridges how my work has essentially always been about the same thing, essentially. I had a client, this is probably almost 20 years ago, who came into my office who said that he was scared of heights, and he worked as a telephone technician. So he would have to climb up into these telephone poles to do his work, and that was not a nice job to have, given that he was so scared in the heights. So he would either have to change his job or get over the fear of heights. And he came into my office, and I attempted, as I usually do, to get him in touch with the anxiety in the office, both indirectly and directly, to help point to the fact that it's actually his thinking about the heights rather than the heights themselves that generates the fear. And I never got him there. It never got real to him. Now, I had asked him to bring his climbing shoes, and as fate would have it, there used to be a telephone pole outside of my old office. So I said, let's go for a climb. Let's go out there and do it. And now it suddenly became real to him. And right before he started his climb, I asked him, on a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is like complete terror and 0 is no fear, where are you? And I can't quite remember what number he was at, but it was probably something like a 4. Notice he was standing on the ground. He wasn't even at the height, and he was at a 4 on the scale. Started climbing, went up to the top, and at the top, I think he was at a 9 or something. It was really, really uncomfortable. And then I said to him, you can come down now. And there was this immediate relief. And he climbed maybe a meter or a meter and a half. And I said, where are you now? And he said, well, I'm almost at a 0 because I know I'm coming down. But notice, as a listener, he was still pretty way up there. So he came down, stepped on the ground, And in that moment where he kind of regained his balance, I looked at him really intently and I said, dude, you were at a 4, standing on the ground, thinking, and you were at a almost 0, way up there, because you had different thinking. How on earth could it be the height? And at that moment, a kind of explosion of insight happened internally. Like he got it. He got it at that felt, embodied level. And whatever client you see, like if they didn't have the crappy thinking they had in the moment, they'd be completely fine. That's essentially the truth of it. And I was able to see that very, very early in my change work career. And essentially, all my work has always pointed towards that realization. The difference is that I've been able to find more and more refined and kind of easier ways of doing it. All right, so let's look at the next question that I got from Meta, and that is, you're known for having some controversial and provocative approaches. Does it take balls to to do this type of work? Well, I'll say this, in the past when I did my provocative hypnosis seminars, the seminars under the banner of provocative hypnosis, which was largely based upon my first book, one of the challenges was that it was sometimes a bit hard to transfer my mindset to a lot of the way that many people think. I think, to be brutally honest, a lot of people will just never do the type of stuff that I used to do. So this was something of a challenge. Now, as I've been able to slice away more and more of the fat, um, and I notice this with the people I mentor from various parts of the world, this is very transferable. You don't have to have a sense of outrageousness or to be a anarchist at heart, as I pretty much am, to do this type of work. So it's a lot easier and it's very, very transferable. All right. There's a few other ones here. Which issues is this psychological illusion approach relevant for? Well, in my experience, the only thing that's really going on is a thought. And what people label as, various mental illnesses or various conditions, in my opinion, is just the thought process taking different types of form. So none of these conditions, whether you call it anxiety or depression or an addiction or a compulsion, none of this exists as a separate object happening to a separate self. None of this exists. All of this is inseparable to a thought process happening in awareness at the moment. So now to go back to a more conventional way of thinking, when I see clients, a vast percentage of my clients I see for various anxiety issues, so phobias, anxieties, what people call PTSD. Again, this medical model way of thinking doesn't resonate with me. Psychiatry doesn't resonate with me. I think it's a fundamentally flawed way of thinking. But what people call PTSD, I see a lot of people with obviously depression issues, compulsions, jealousy, pain, psychosomatic issues, allergies, low back pain, tinnitus, these types of things. So now it's not a panacea to be pragmatic in terms of, there are people who just aren't ready for this, who just won't hear this or see this. Um, and when people aren't, you have to have other ways of working, behavioral ways of working, or more conventional ways of working. No matter what you're doing, it's never a panacea. It's not all your clients will respond to whatever framework that you are presenting. So it's less a matter of a so-called issue. It's more a matter of um, both obviously my ability to reach that person, the person's willingness or way of processing information in a way where they can hear stuff, and the relationship between us. So again, I get people sometimes who just don't relate to this. Like, I don't succeed with all my clients. Anyone who says that they do is a big fat liar. Well, they may not be fat, but they're still lying, whether they know it or not. So, yeah, let's see here. We have some more questions. Is it only relevant for hypnotherapists? No. Anyone who works with clients to make a change. So, if you're a hypnotherapist, if you're an NLP practitioner, if you're a coach, if you're a psychotherapist of some kind, or if you just want to understand more about your own subjective experience, um, this is something to explore. Um, well, why should best friend or any change worker attend the seminar? Well, anyone who's curious about human beings, curious about the human condition, so to speak, and who are looking for a fresh approach. Again, virtually any approach that you learn will be operating from a mental illness approach, a kind of old psychiatric paradigm of deficiency and disorder. Uh, First of all, there's really no scientific evidence to support those notions. Um, and I think they're not useful. I mean, even people who do cognitive behavioral therapy are presupposing that there's this object called anxiety, or this object called depression, this thing called depression that they are treating, with these techniques. And I think this is deeply flawed. So if you again, I view it as psychological illusions, and not something to treat, but more something to expose and to have an embodied experience of. So if that resonates with you on some level, and B, um, you know, I've played with this for 21 years. Like, I've really been in the trenches with it. I've really done the homework. I don't know everything, you know. Still have a lot of flaws, but it's a chance to learn from my experience, and I promise I won't impose any BS on you. There's no diagnostic system. There's really very little ideology. Um, there's no parts to evoke. There's no root causes. There's no thing like a self in there, or a magic unconscious mind that will expose. There's nothing like that. So if you're a pragmatist at heart, and if you're kind of curious and playful, um, you'll probably enjoy it. That's my invitation to you, anyways. Let's see. Well, could you say something about your training methods? Well, I I like telling stories, obviously. So there's some storytelling. A lot of use of suggestion and metaphor, given that I have a solid hypnosis background. I like games. I like paradoxes. There's a lot of thought experiments that will be done. So there will be a lot of learning by doing. And I also like to demo my work. So For those of you who attend, who may want to work on something, I like to do demos. So there will be plenty of demo time and practice time. And, when I see clients in my office, most of the time we just do thought experiments. Like I don't ask them a lot of questions about their lives or their childhood or their parents or their partners or anything like that. I just help them see through these these psychological illusions, which largely result of us thinking without quite knowing that we're thinking. And to the extent that people do that, it has a tendency to be a game changer. All right, let's see. There's there's some more stuff here too. Now, this one's funny. I've never been asked this before. How would I like to be remembered in this, hypnotherapy field? Um, I think I'm way too young to be asked such a question. I suddenly feel old. I suddenly become aware of my own mortality, even though I do spend quite a bit of time meditating upon mortality. I think meditating on death is one of the most healthy things that you can do. That, and of course also inquiring into the notion of who's dying, which may be a bit out there for a lot of people. But how would I like to be remembered? I've never been asked the question. I haven't really thought about it in that way. There's a related question which is easier to answer, and how would I like to have changed the field? Well, what I would like to contribute to is I would like to contribute to the whole mental illness and treatment model dying out as much as it can. And I really would like to influence people to see that what they think of as mental illnesses really are thinking without knowing that they're thinking, and various forms that the thought process can take, and to contribute to simplifying the work and it being less full of BS. So to the extent that I can do that, I mean, I'm still a relatively young guy, but I see clients from all over the world regularly. I get to mentor some people. I get to do some seminars. I get to reach some people, with my books and my blog. So I have no grandiose notions of changing the world or anything like that. I kind of suspect that this may be somewhat cynical, but I often suspect that many people who set out to change the world really want to rule it. Um, I'm not really looking to rule anyone or to have anyone rule me in that sense. I just like exploring. Um Hopefully, in terms of being remembered, as a guy who was as honest as he could be, and who made some difference. I think that's pretty much it. But anyways, um, yeah, these are some interesting questions too. What have I changed my mind about and gotten wiser about, and are there things that I used to believe that I no longer believe? Yeah, as I started with this, I my first major NLP trainer was a guy called Tad James, and I remember we were taught to do 2 to 2.5 hour detailed personal histories, and to evoke meta programs, and to talk about the prime directives of the unconscious mind. And so I used to do stuff like that early, and these days I hardly ever talk about people's past. I mean, a little bit, but very, very little. I used to believe that there was such a thing as um, an unconscious mind or even a conscious mind, that there was such a thing as a self to be worked on or to be improved, that there was a thing such as depression to be worked on. I've come to see these as illusory constructs. Um, so it's again largely a process of, of simplifying and cutting, slicing away um, all the fats, so to speak. So I hope this was useful. I hope this was gave you some clarity and some insight into this type of work. I mentioned Method by Holt. I'm doing a seminar in Denmark, May 19th, May 20th, uh, 2018. It will be held in English. I really hope to see you there. Um, you know, I'm doing a bigger event in London in a few days, and I think a big advantage of this group, which will in all likelihood be smaller, is that it's going to be more intimate. There's going to be more chance for people to work with me live as demo subjects on stage. So wherever you find the information, if you look just below the video, you will find a link to the website that provides the information. So hope to see you there. Thanks for listening.